But so the ideation process, I'm curious about the whole experience of which idea do you choose? How do you choose what not to do? And then how do you know when to commit and go all in? Because it sounds like, for one side, Brian, there was a seed of an idea when Aaron got involved. And Aaron, it sounds like you have been an accelerator with contributing a ton of other additional ideas. And it sounds like the two of you are enhancing that every conversation. So how do you do it all? Like, which one do you choose? How do you choose what not to do? And then when do you commit?
I will be happy to take that. So we interviewed well over 100 software leaders. And, Brian and I talked about this early on. Like, you can have all the ideas in the world, but nobody here is, Steve Jobs. Even Steve Jobs wasn't Steve Jobs. He would, customer test things just like everybody else should. And so it becomes, what are the ideas that customers are screaming at? What are the things that are going to ultimately be valuable to them? And look at every single thing that we build through their eyes. And is this going to help them support a decision? Is this actually going to help them be better leaders? So that becomes the rubric through everything. And you have to have enough of those in common so that you actually have conviction to actually go and build the thing. Because the other technique we were doing, and not everybody does it this way, this is kind of interesting, is that we have been, for Brian and I, it's easier for us as software engineers ultimately to build a feature and show it than it is to prototype it. It's funny, I have an account on Figma and I love the product. But I actually found it's actually easier for me to actually build the UI in React than Figma. Maybe I just need Figma training. But that was one kind of interesting aspect. So the best way to have a feature is build it, put it in front of a customer, see if it resonates, and ultimately see if they use it. And our design partner has been great in actually allowing us to measure how they actually do use some features or not. And we've actually made decisions in the past few months of not doing certain features based on lack of usage. So, that's, one of the controlling ways that we think about good product management in a startup.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are two beliefs or insights that bring us back to center and keep us grounded in terms of what we want from a product development standpoint. One is that, at least as far as how Workspace thinks about the problem, one is that we think that the hard part about software isn't software, it's people. That's the hard part of software leadership. There are a ton of tools out there that really focus in on taking a metrics-driven approach to understanding your team, and they'll go ahead and scrape Git commits. And don't get me wrong, there's value in quantitative data, but to me that's not the tricky part. The tricky part is the people side, and HR tools aren't really built to serve the needs of software leaders, people with an operational role, people who are accountable to the business. Software is increasingly expensive. It's the most critical part of modern enterprises. It's difficult to estimate. It's difficult to build the right thing, right? Software, what we do is very, very hard. But for me, the hardest part of that, or the most critical component of that is getting the people right. And so we wanted to start with a people-centered understanding of what it means to manage software teams. And the second thing was that we think of our competition fundamentally as a spreadsheet rather than some other arbitrary tool out there. We think that the most important thing we have to do is help people add value to what they're doing by getting them out of ad hoc tooling into something that's more suited for what we think leaders need in this era. And so we filter sort of everything we look at through the frame of those two things. Can we stay human-centered? And do we think that this is a considerable value add over simply shoving it into a cell somewhere and crossing your fingers? So I don't know. That's pretty high level advice. I don't know how applicable it is, but I do think it's important to have some fundamentals that you keep coming back to. I think Aaron named a third one, right? Which is that, and this is again advice that's difficult to generalize, and your mileage may vary here, but we have found for ourselves that if you focus really tightly on building fast feedback loops, which is again difficult to do over the long term, then if your feedback loops are sufficiently fast, you can prototype something in real software, as quicker than you might be able to do in some sort of prototyping tool, especially once you take into account the cycle it takes for someone to conceptualize it and sketch it out and then bring it to a team and then they say yes or no, right? I mean, the other thing with the startup though is that there's no one to delegate to, right? Like there's no oh, I'll wait for a designer to come up with this. Like, what are you going to do? Not build software? Like, sure, yes, there are in lean startup terms plenty of ways of conceptualizing this as a run up to actually building the thing. But look, if you know how to write code and you got some code in front of you, why not go for it? Is sort of my hot take there. We've been fortunate there so far, and it will not last forever because nothing ever does, right? Software becomes brittle, it becomes difficult to change over time. You have to really fight to keep it limber. We're not yet at the crisis inflection point there. And that's one of the tough things about startups as well, right? Is that when you are building software really rapidly, not understanding whether you've met your needs yet, you are probably not reinforcing every aspect of it as you go. And so there's a process of like returning back later and shoring it up or sort of removing the scaffolding as you build up the brick wall or whatever. I'm not quite sure what the right analogy is here.